Editor-in-Chief, the Division of Cardiovascular Medicine at the University of Miami. And today I have the distinct pleasure to moderate this amazing session on the role of AI in cardiovascular care, integrating the future into clinical practice today. It's an event sponsored by SCAI and BridgeBio through an unrestricted grant. And I have the distinct pleasure to have several co-panelists and speakers today. The Dr. Rohan Kera from Yale, who is going to share with us his latest in the field through his amazing work on how AI can be integrated in cardiovascular care and what is the big deal. Following that, we will have the pleasure to listen from Dr. Elias from Columbia about the basics of AI in medicine. Then we'll have a nice discussion with the active participation of Dr. Andrikopoulou from Seattle, who is Associate Professor of Medicine at the University of Washington and Director of the Echo Lab there. And of course, the well-known to most of us, Dr. Julia Grapsa from the Brigham and Women's, big educator and clinician in the field with special focus on echocardiography. Then we will pass it to Dr. General Felipe from Morristown, who is the Director of Structural Heart Program, to share with us the aspect of how AI can be integrated in structural heart with emphasis on aortic stenosis treatment. And then finally, I will conclude with a little more generic overview of how AI can play a role in coronary interventions. And then finally, altogether, we'll conclude Dr. Maddox as well. Thomas Maddox from Washington University is also part of the panel, an important part of the discussion. And with that, I believe that we are ready to go. Let me share the disclosures of the panelists and the speakers. And also, I would like to highlight in the next slide, please, that this is an event organized by SCAI and sponsored through an unrestricted educational grant from BridgeBio. I would like to remind the audience that you can claim one CME and one MOC through the participation in this event. And you can claim this MOC and CME through the link through the SCAI portal. So we will start with Dr. Kera. Very well known to all of us. He's, as I said, Assistant Professor of Medicine at Yale, and he has done an amazing job in the field of AI and how AI can leverage non-invasive imaging and EKG to diagnose important pathologies. So, Dr. Kera, please go ahead.
Hello, everyone. It's my great pleasure to be here today for AI and Cardiovascular Care webinar. I'm talking about AI and Cardiovascular. What is the big deal? I am Rohan Kera. I'm an assistant professor at Yale, and I lead the Cardiovascular Data Science Lab. Here are my disclosures. So our focus in Cardiovascular Data Science Lab is actually exploring what is the big deal about AI. And I think the key things that we focus on is the fact that AI can be applied to existing data to optimize disease detection. It can actually help us find personalization of how to deliver care. And finally, how to measure quality of care in the best possible way using AI. I think in the interest of time, I want to focus on one key application is AI applied to existing data for disease detection. A key problem in our day-to-day is cardiovascular disease, especially structural heart disease, has a long pre-symptomatic course. There's early stage disease in the community that people actually have, and nobody actually knows it. They often interact with health systems and in part of their primary care visits, where they do increasingly complex tests, but very few people are actually diagnosed before the onset of disease, and therefore very few people are treated before the onset of symptoms. So 80% are not diagnosed before symptom onset, and often, as is the case for opportunistic testing, those from vulnerable communities are least likely to be diagnosed. But there is this idea that even though people have progressive underlying disease, they are generating health data consistently, including from their personal health devices like smartphones and smartwatches, healthcare maintenance visits like ECGs, and often from unrelated emergency room visits or when somebody pushes a probe on their chest and they have some ultrasound imaging. And I want to say examples like the diseases that often can have manifestations on these modalities, but cannot be seen by experts include things like LVSD or hypertrophic cardiomyopathy, cardiac amyloid, and valve disorders that are important for this community. And this is why I feel like the middle example, electrocardiogram, is particularly important. There are 300 million ECGs performed worldwide annually. It's the standard of care from a small hospital to a big health system. And more ECGs are done each year than any other cardiac diagnostic test combined. So this is the important test that we can really leverage successfully. Colleagues across the country have spent a lot of time developing many tools that take ECG data and do a range of diagnosis, especially including what pair presented and other disorders, specifically range of hidden disorders directly from signals that are captured as part of the ECG acquisition. As a clinician, however, there are many instances that I will not have access to the raw voltage data. It's a health system enterprise level solution. So how do we arm clinicians who don't have access to the voltage data to diagnose these conditions using these devices? So we asked this question in our group whether we can use the image of a 12-lead ECG successfully and enhance value of what clinicians already have access to. So for this, we created this new paradigm of generating synthetic ECGs that represent a range of variations and simulate artifacts that occur in the real-world setting, and pair that with gold standard diagnostic data from structural heart disease, including echo, MRIs, and others. Then we created modalities that can actually read beyond a clinician can. So people in this room who are attending the talk will often understand, oh, this lead has this P wave and this QRS complex and T wave. But how do we understand the pixel to pixel difference from various wave shapes? And what if the shapes vary across the entire different leads? And what does it mean across the span of a single heart, 10-second acquisition in the rhythm lead? So we turn this into a complex image-based problem. Instead of thinking as a signal, but pixel-to-pixel changes can be leveraged to build computer vision models that can turn this complex ECG into something that can be used to diagnose structural heart diseases, including a range of ECG formats. And we were able to do that first for the application of LV systolic dysfunction, which we published in Circulation a couple of years ago. And this QR code shows you that application that can be used to detect LV systolic dysfunction directly from photos of ECG. Because we're using images, we could actually go to many sites and directly engage participants in the study, which include people who had undergone testing and including ECGs of this vast variation in quality. We were able to show that regardless of the layout of ECGs, looking at ECGs that come from somebody with or without LVSD, we were able to discriminate them 91 to 95% of the times accurately. But how, we also asked this question, okay, we built this tool, this seems to work well. How will clinicians use this in practice? So then we focused on building an app called the CardScan app, which is now available in the App Store as part of our research initiative. We are doing prospective studies using the apps that can take images of ECGs just like any check would, and then be used to really create a way to deploy a range of models, including one that detects structural heart diseases, a composite of them, that was published in JACC this year, LVSD, as I mentioned, hypertrophic cardiomyopathy, aortic stenosis, and amyloid cardiomyopathy, including one of the tools which was granted the FDA's breakthrough device designation. But then there's a question, people often don't undergo 12-lead ECGs. How do you reach those people who haven't had a 12-lead ECG? Therefore, we built a CLARDS Plus ECG platform that can take ECG data from any wearable or portable device that is commercially available, can pass through a HIPAA-compliant app. Again, that app called CLARDS Plus is also available in the iOS App Store, and then can be really turned into a dashboard of predictions on real time for many of the structural heart diseases that we've shown we can detect on 12-lead ECGs directly from all-lead ECGs with pretty close similar performance. Our next frontier was how do we automate diagnosis for more advanced testing? So that means if somebody goes in echocardiogram, how can we use that information to diagnose things like aortic stenosis? Often that requires a range of Doppler measurements and often a lot of clinical interpretation of the valve structure and function. So first, we built this tool that detects severe aortic stenosis directly from one passer long axis acquisition without any Doppler superimposition. and including in our set, a different population than they use for development, and in a population at Cedars-Sinai with very similar performance, we were able to show that a single parasternal long axis view using our deep learning video-based model can be used to identify people with aortic stenosis with very high accuracy. Moreover, even though we developed the tool to just distinguish severe AS versus absence of severe AS, the tool learned signatures of graded response. So people with no aortic stenosis had very low predictions, which is the orange bar on the side. The blue shows people in mild to moderate AS, and they were in the middle of the range. And pink is those people with severe AS with higher predictions, suggesting the model learned signatures of graded aortic stenosis severity. We extended this work more recently, published in JAMA, where we show that we can take any number of inputs from a echocardiogram, a full report, and that can be passed through this multitask deep learning model, which can do a range of about 39 measurement and classification tasks and can be used to generate an automated report directly. This model called PanEcho is open source and publicly available. And finally, we have done some work in using AI for electrocardiograms and AI echo for predicting disease development. This includes using ECGs as a biomarker for heart failure. We showed both in Yale and multiple prospective cohorts, not only for 12-lead ECGs, but also for 1-lead ECGs with very similar performance in 2 published studies over the last year. We also showed that the echo-based marker for detecting AS serves as a biomarker for progression to severe aortic stenosis. And even among categories of people with sclerosis, mild and moderate AS, we were able to distinguish using this score called DASI, an aortic stenosis severity index score, able to distinguish who would progress to severe AS faster. Again, the goal here is to show that even among people with a single class of severity, there is a huge gradation that can be mapped to a single AI score computable on a single parasternal long axis view. Next up, we showed that you can use echo or point of care ultrasound in the emergency room to also detect other structural heart disorders such as amyloid cardiomyopathy and hypertrophic cardiomyopathy, detecting them in a very high accuracy, and we're able to show that these diagnoses can be made up to 2 years earlier based on point of care ultrasounds that were done in the emergency room for years before their actual diagnosis in a clinical setting. Finally, we showed that you can combine ECG and echo to turn into a biomarker for disease progression. We tested this for people who underwent testing for suspected cardiac amyloid and under P/P testing, and we chose both positives and negatives eventually, and tracked back over time their previous echoes and ECGs before they developed these symptoms. We found that in 2 health systems using echo, which is the example above, and ECG, the example on the right, the blue line versus the yellow line shows that the blue line are people who tested positive eventually, and they turned positive up to 3 years before their eventual diagnosis on P/P, suggesting that it's a dynamic signature for ATTR cardiac amyloid that can be picked up on both ECG and echo correctly. And we externally validated this signal in Houston Methodist, where we showed both echo and ECG patterns as well. So I hope I've shown you that we built tools that clinicians can use directly for 12-lead ECGs, that we can bring to the communities using portable devices, and can actually provide expert level diagnosis with AI focus directly. And I think we're trying to plug this gap of using early data for advanced diagnosis correctly. We are working with many partners globally to really enhance the use of these tools for clinical diagnosis. And finally, we're launching a series of randomized clinical trials and prospective studies funded by both the NIH and pharmaceutical partners, where we're detecting, in the first example, large-scale burden of amyloid detection. Second, we are assessing both the detection and prognostication of severe AS. And finally, we're doing a multimodality AI study, multi-country study, assessing how we can use AI ECG and AI focus in consort to diagnose undiagnosed cardiac amyloid. So in conclusion, there is an increased digital availability of large number of data sources. AI can augment human capacity. Technology that is built for data as they currently exist is likely to be more easily implemented than ones that require us to change how we deliver care. And finally, we need to have caution about what we learn and how we measure the impact of these. I suggest you follow our work on cars-lab.org, where we provide many of these tools for actually interaction, and many of the code sets are available publicly as well. Thank you.
That was excellent. Thank you so much, Rohan. So this obviously is going to initiate some very, very nice discussion. essentially what you showed here is using widely available data, non-invasive medical data like EKG and echocardiography, using easily accessible methodologies like our iPhone or a watch or everything, and to come up with important diagnosis or guidance for several pathologies. It's fascinating as a concept, and I'm sure that there's a lot of discussion here that will be generated. Let me pass it to Pierre here, Dr. Elias from Columbia, who is gonna, in the next few minutes, going to summarize his research and latest on how AI basics in medicine, just to educate us on how AI can help us in cardiovascular medicine in general. And then we will have a nice discussion on those two lectures. So, Pierre, we cannot hear you. Please unmute.
Thanks so much for having me, Yanis. Really excited to be here. Lots of friendly and lovely faces that I haven't seen in a bit. I want this to be a simple, exciting dynamic and then generate questions, anger, all the emotions and the like. So I hope that this is useful. These are my disclosures. Okay. First thing, where does AI actually make a difference? And specifically, I'm talking about the AI that we're all thinking about today, which is, advanced forms of deep learning. The answer is imaging and complex language. Any place where the only thing we've had to get to an answer is the human brain to date, that is the place where AI can make a difference. So when all you have is human interpretation, you have an amazing pattern recognition device, but it is flawed. And all I have to do to prove that to you is tell you this picture on the right-hand side, all of the horizontal gray lines are parallel to one another, even though your brain is telling you not. So we have an amazing pattern recognition device, but it is inherently flawed. And for the first time in human history, we have a different pattern recognition device in advanced AI that we can apply to imaging and complex language. For a long time, the answer was, could the AI match the expert's performance, right? You want to try and detect pneumonia from a chest X-ray, so you give it a bunch of human experts' answers, and then you say, well, does this patient have pneumonia or not? And your AI model got closer to the human expert. Maybe it's 80% is good. Good for you. That's great. And that was what the AI looked like for a long time. In the last year or two, what you've really seen is, are there important clinical questions that experts currently cannot answer? And instead, could you train the model on some more advanced upstream tests, right? So for example, like what Rohan was presenting, diseases that we otherwise diagnose from echocardiograms, can you detect them from electrocardiograms? And so you then actually ask the AI model, well, can you do something the cardiologist can't? And we've seen this whole stream of new technologies that are not matching the performance of human experts, but actually exceeding them. If you take anything away from my talk, I really just want it to be this slide. This was a great paper by Bob Wachter, who's the chair of medicine at UCSF, and Eric Brynjolfsson, who's an economist at Stanford. Time and time again, you see technology, and specifically information technology, come to new industries. And sometimes it leads to this explosion in productivity, and other times it falls completely flat. And Eric has spent his career studying this phenomenon across industries. And he's basically boiled it down to this two key hypothesis, which is two things must be true and two keys are required in order to unlock this major productivity gain with a new wave of technology. The first is that the technology must be sufficiently better than what is happening today. And I can tell you in medicine, in specific areas, that's definitely true. AI is clearly better than what we're doing today. It is the second key that will decide our fates, which is, are we willing to reimagine the work itself? Are we willing to reimagine what it means to be a cardiologist and how we practice? And if we are, we can unlock these massive productivity gains. We can really think about the way that we take care of patients and the way that we deliver care in entirely new ways. But if we're not willing to do that, we're not going to see any of the real and meaningful productivity impacts of these technologies. So I'll give you one example. This is the question I've been obsessed about for the last 5 years. We don't have a screening test for most forms of cardiovascular disease. Like what Rohan was saying, can you take a cheap and ubiquitous test and then can you figure out who needs the more expensive test and thus figure out who actually needs these diseases? So we had a seminal paper come out in Nature 8 weeks ago. And what we said is, could we detect all of the forms of structural heart disease? And Rohan's group has done phenomenal work in this area, and folks at the Mayo Clinic have done this. It's not a one-trick pony. There are many groups around the country who said, hey, this is doable. And so we detected all of these different diseases from an electrocardiogram, and we said, hey, we think this patient needs an echo or not. I just want to walk you through like where are we at with these technologies? So we validated this at 11 hospitals, 4 health systems, 2 countries. It works great. We then ran it on 85,000 patients while they were getting EKGs, and we followed those patients for a year. Amongst those patients who had a high-risk EKG based off of AI and no prior echocardiogram, about half of them go on to get an echo as part of routine care. The positive predictive value is 74%. If you look at all first-time echoes in our health system, the positive predictive value is around 36%. So already you have twice the positive predictive value as routine clinical care. But here's the really wild thing. Half of the patients that the model thought were high risk for undiagnosed structural heart disease don't go on to get an echo in the next year. So we're missing half of the new structural heart disease diagnoses that are showing up in our health system. And then we did a prospective clinical trial where we brought in 100 of these patients who are of different risk categories, and we saw the same sort of positive predictive value, 73% with structural heart disease. And we then had to go head to head against cardiologists reading 3,200 EKGs with and without AI. And then I, as a cardiologist, my accuracy is 64%, and then the AI model is at 78%. So we really are seeing this thing that we were all trained and told you can't do, detect heart failure or, significant valve disease from an EKG. An AI model can actually do it pretty darn well. And we're now running the largest cardiovascular clinical trial in AI in the country, where 54,000 patients are getting screened with the AI model across 8 emergency departments. And that trial will conclude next year. Okay, another area where I think people have been really interested is all of the ambient AI scribes. So, whether that's like Ambience or a Bridge or DAX, many people have been wondering, like, are these things great or not, and things like that. We actually have an editorial coming out in New England Journal AI where we did this big year in review, but I want to just kind of give you like the Spark Notes version of that. So these AI technologies where like you just put down your phone and it listens and then it writes the note for you. It seems like there may be some tangible benefits in reducing cognitive load for physicians, particularly, if you've got a busy interventional clinic, you got to go see like 30 or 40 patients a day. It'd be really nice if you can just have the conversation with the patient, template out how they're doing post-intervention, and the like. The flip side, though, is it doesn't seem to improve people's efficiency. There's been multiple studies now that I've looked at this that haven't really seen long-term efficiency gains with the technology. And when you ask people after they've been using the technology for like 6 to 12 months, hey, do you love it? Do you hate it? The net promoter score, where like minus 100 is like, I hate this thing, it's the worst thing ever, and positive 100 is, this is the best thing I've ever used. Their score ends up right around 0. So they feel pretty ambivalent about it. So the AI scribes, are they useful? Yes. In reality, I think the place where people are seeing the most potential benefit is in rev cycle management and like potentially helping with upcoding or improving the coding efficiency for your visits. And I think a lot of health systems that are adopting it right now, they're looking at either reduced cognitive load or the rev cycle management improvement and increased billing as the reasons that for adoption. Okay, lastly, I want to leave you with all these new technologies are going to come out. There's going to be a bunch of vaporware and smoke and mirrors. How do you decide, is this technology actually something that's going to help? Here are the 5 questions I ask. 1, is there actually some utilization of like high dimensional data, like unstructured nodes or medical imaging that's being utilized by this and you think is underutilized? Hey, there's all of these EKGs, there's super rich information on them, and I've never thought about trying to detect heart failure or valve disease from my EKGs before. 2, was this actually trained on data where there was enough cases where this is worth caring about? And then in your system, does that translate? Right? So do you actually have enough cases of like undiagnosed hypertrophic cardiomyopathy for it to matter for you to deploy this sort of technology? Or is it just too much of an edge case? 3, do you actually have high quality labels that were either used to create the model or which you can verify the model to make sure that the answer is correct. So is this just based off of a human's opinion, or is it they actually went and they referred those patients for PYP scans and they diagnosed them for cardiac amyloidosis and proved that this thing works? Four, if we presume that the best possible case is like an odds ratio of 5, does that actually change your clinical decision making? So, for example, let's say this AI model says, oh, I can take all of the patients with EKGs and find you those patients with hypertrophic cardiomyopathy. Well, would you send, let's say the positive predictive value is 1 or 2%, would you send 50 patients for a cardiac MRI to find one new case of hypertrophic cardiomyopathy? Really thinking through what is the underlying prevalence of the disease in the population you're thinking about, and how would this change your clinical decision making? And does it seem like a reasonable next step or action that you would take in that case? And lastly, would you trust the robot? Should it be deciding who's getting a transplanted heart or not? Probably not yet. But are there simple and clear actions where you and your colleagues would feel comfortable trusting the robot? Transcribing your note and your interaction with the patient, that seems a lot more reasonable. If you're interested in this, we have a great 2-part review in Jack. Rohan also has a great review in Jack. So there's been 3 reviews in the last year. Tom was the senior author on this review. These are the QR codes for them. So, you can read more about interesting research, where are we at from a regulatory standpoint, what's coming up, all of those sorts of things. So I'll stop there.
Lovely. That was a great summary and very, I would say, provocative. So let me now move it to some discussion. Let me ask Dr. Grapsa. Iulia, you're an excellent top-class imager, non-invasive cardiologist practicing in a top-class institution. Would you trust and would you feel comfortable using these tools presented by Rohan and Pierre? So would you trust those tools to tell you what does your EKG and echo shows?
Thank you so much, Yanis, for inviting me in this stellar webinar. So, Pierre and Rohan, they have been very convincing. So yes, I'm convinced that AI is positive. Start from the basics. And that was 2 stellar presentations. Rohan elegantly presented the benefits of AI. And then Pierre, I really love here your point that you need to understand artificial intelligence before you use it. So that's the main point. It can be your biggest asset in clinical practice, from diagnosis or to the management. But as long as you take the time and to understand it, to understand how to use it, and of course, make the best of this software. We have a lot of softwares. And the easiest thing is to get confused, say, I prefer the traditional method, I'm not going to bother. But actually, if you realize how many benefits has the artificial intelligence to help you in everyday clinical practice, from the transcription tool up to the way that we integrate all non-invasive methods to get the best diagnosis, it's a great asset for everyday clinical practice. It's worth the time to investigate further and to make the best to understand it.
So then this, since you answered positively on the question whether you trust, and you said emphatically you trust these tools, these technologies, then the question that goes to Dr. Andrikopoulou, Effie, is the following. Why then we need Dr. Grapsa to read the EKG and echo, since we have a technology which is widely available and can do the job without her?
Yes, Yanni, thank you so much for the invitation. And Pierre and Rohan, as always, not surprised, fantastic job. I always feel like I come out smarter after listening to Rohan and Pierre. First of all, let me just say straight up, I agree with you, Leah. I'm an optimist by nature, but especially when it comes to healthcare AI, I'm an optimist by reason as well. And the 2 main points that I take from both Rohan's and Pierre's talks are the 2 M's, multimodal data, imaging, language, as well as other data, genomic, proteomic, other lab biomarkers, and metadata generated by patients themselves using wearables, apps, personal digital health devices. the integration of the two, I think, is what is going to transform healthcare in the future. And I agree with Pierre in that it's going to change how the systems of care are designed. However, we're not there yet. And that's because of the limitations of AI today. Based on the available models today, there still are significant limitations that still necessitate the human in the loop. And that's why AI that is available today, be that generative AI, LLMs, NLP-driven models, imaging-based models, they still need the human in the loop to supervise, double-check, confirm, and they're used as supportive, collaborative tools and not as replacements. I think we're not there yet. We're not there today. And I don't know how soon we're going to get there because innovation is outpacing regulation. So not sure how fast we're going to get there for reasons that are not related to the capabilities of innovation and technology. But for today, we still need doctors like Iulia and yourself and Pierre to supervise, both during the design, during the pilot phases, implementation, and with post-deployment monitoring to make sure that the model continues to do what it was designed to do and continues to serve the patients that it's meant to serve, and that there's no significant drift, either because of patients changing or because of issues with the technology.
So Dr. Grafsa still stays in business for the foreseeable future. Thomas, let me ask you, based on this discussion so far, when do you see, you've been doing great work in the field, AI-related technologies playing important integral role in our practice, and what would that role be in the, let's say, the next 5 or 10 years?
Yeah, I think I agree with what's been said. And I guess my stance is, although I'm an enthusiast around AI, as you can probably tell by some of the stuff that I've participated in, I'm also recognizing this, we just need to be realistic here. And AI is not magic. AI is not, going to change everything in the world. It's a tool, just like we've had various tools in cardiac imaging get developed and deployed over time. And in many ways, I don't think this is any different. So, we have a technical tool that can greatly increase the speed and reproducibility in some of the examples we've seen, how we interpret EKGs and then detect underlying structural heart disease. That's great. And I think all the data that we've seen, both from the groups here as well as broadly, suggests that this is a reliable technology. And so Julia is saying, I trust it. I agree. I do trust it. But I trust it just like I trust an EKG, which has a set sensitivity and specificity, just as much as I trust an echo, which is a set sensitivity and specificity. It will increase over time, but it's asymptotic. Perfection is not possible. It'll get really good. But then our job is to figure out when and where do we deploy it. And so I think this technology will get integrated into our standard imaging platforms. We'll need to decide, both as cardiologists, but also probably as health system leaders, when does it make sense to pay for that? And what kind of value are we getting from it? And I think ultimately Pierre had a great slide. I've seen this presentation several times. I'm always struck by when he shows the flow diagram that you get a positive predictive value of 74%. But you need to look one step upstream of that. And that was among people where some doctor thought they needed an echo. So it is by definition an enhanced sample. And that's exactly what we do. We decide where we're going to do that tool. And then that tool becomes maximally effective in being able to do that. So I think it is incumbent upon us, and the role of physicians is to actually decide where to deploy this. Is it generating the kind of ROI? And then I don't know about y'all's health systems, but we've got a lot of business already. If we're going to identify a bunch more patients who have an abnormality on echo, and then we need to decide how to manage that, great. we're already pretty constrained from a bandwidth point of view. How are we going to meet the need that we identify? So, your overall question was, how do we integrate this over the next coming years? These are the next sets of questions. And I very much am excited that Rohan and Pierre and the other researchers in the field, likely in combination with industry, will develop this tool to where it's ready for production deployment. Now it's time for us as docs and administrators of this health system to know how we put it in place in a way that is responsible to the patients and doesn't break the bank.
That's great. And this reminds me, I'm an interventional cardiologist, that it took us so many years to have a guideline class 1 indication for imaging IVUS and OCT while we were doing this for many, many years. So the question then to Pierre is the following. Is this excitement going to translate to an actionable integration and quickly in our clinical practice, or we're going to keep having discussions in the panels, exciting discussions about the future, and maybe in the same way that nano technology has been here for the last 20 years, expected to bring a revolution, but still this revolution never came.
Yeah, I think it's the perfect question. And since I'm a general cardiologist, I can say lots of like fun inflammatory things about interventional cardiology. I would say like interventional cardiologists use a lot of mediocre technologies that don't have great evidence behind them. I mean, we were putting a ton of Impellas in people before there was really compelling evidence to do so. Ecos, all these sorts of things. And yet those technologies exist and are being utilized out there, because they realize like, hey, we have to, we think there's a benefit to this. We will make clinical judgments on where that benefit exists, and we know the evidence will continue to roll in. So I think there is a larger infrastructure problem that exists, which is we know how to pay for drugs and we know how to pay for devices, and we've never figured out a way to actually derive value from software and pay for it. And most digital health companies, have done poorly for 10 or 15 years for this exact reason. We do not have like an overall structure as a country for, hey, there's a lot of value behind this software or this, the software as a medical device, AMD, and the like. And so I think that's honestly the biggest thing plaguing us, which is, are we going to have a systematic approach that allows for continual reinvestment in the technology so that the evidence can be generated and the best things can flow to the top? And I don't have an answer to that. I think people are trying, but it's really, really tough to see, is it going to come through or not? That is the major limitation here. If you ask me, are there clear and specific areas where these technologies can help? Like, absolutely. My instinct, though, is that like it will be very specific places that have like a really outsized impact and just kind of clean use cases, whether that is, new next generation biomarkers for specific diseases or specific use cases, or very specific types of use cases in the cath lab or in other places. So I think a few things will break through, but until we see a general model of like how we pay for software at large, then we'll have a question. The AI-based CPT codes are just starting to exist, and mass adoption for them is a real question. But as of like 7 months ago, there's now a CPT code for AI analysis of the EKG that pays $130 per EKG. And if you're a system that does, 400, 500,000 EKGs, you bill for 50 to 100,000 of those, that could be a significant source of revenue. But it's really going to come down to the business models, I think.
Excellent. So we all share excitement, but calculated excitement, because there's always the risk of creating enthusiasm without building, as you said, the foundation of the framework at the FDA level, at the CMS level, at the clinical experts level, to adopt this technology, and it might end up at the end staying as just an exciting opportunity and missed opportunity. I believe the future is here. Let me now pass it from the role of AI in diagnosis using widely available data like EKG, echo, and so forth, to how AI can play a role in therapy, in interventional cardiology. And I'm going to pass it to Felipe to tell us, to share a viewpoint on the role of AI in structural heart, with emphasis on TAVR.
All right, thank you so much. Can you hear me well and see my slide?
We are super.
Perfect. All right. I feel very privileged. I'm not sure I'm on the right webinar with so many intelligent people like that. But the way I see my role, I'm going to try to be very practical. I feel like we're just at the beginning of the how to use AI, and I'm going to share a little bit how we elected to use AI at Morristown Medical Center now, and how we see the future with very a lot of excitement. So I kind of divide the AI at Morristown in three phases. The first phase actually was really we use Ignite Cardio Care, which is actually it's more a natural language processing software, and which actually really triage the entire AS population around Morristown in our 7 hospital, and really using for research screening for early TAVR, which is severe AS no symptom population TAVR versus medical therapy, and the progress trial, which is moderate AS TAVR versus clinical surveillance. So I use it really frenetically to identify patients that could be good candidate for the trial. And, we just have the list that Ignite give us, 1,000 patients with severe AS and moderate AS, and we triage by referring doctor, and I was texting and calling people. And we ended up being the first enroller in both trial and very successful. But that was really, I would say, the beginning, because we still have to organize a database, but it was very successful to bring a lot of patient, identify patient. Then the phase 2 is we use CardioCare to roll in the automatic notification with Target AS initiative, which is everyone who has class 1 indication for AVR in our population. We send an automated notification to the patient to consult a physician because they may need an AVR. So that was more automatic, less work for us, and that was a phase 2. And now we're in the phase 3, which is, I believe, is the screening phase, to try to detect disease early and try to send them quickly to the appropriate care. And I think this is where we are. I believe I'm still in a dating phase where I try to identify which AI software or tools will be useful for us, not to overcrowd our system, but really identify patient appropriately. And this is where we are very excited to start to use EcoNex with Pierre, ECG screening for structural heart, which I think this is a great first start. AKO, the electronic stethoscope that we're deploying in all our physician office. Sparrow, which is a stetophone, an app where you can listen for a murmur, and also Echo IQ for triage and see who's going to progress and who need more attention quickly. So I think this is where I put my bet on not only one technology but 4, which I think can leverage the pitfall on one or the other. And we'll see if my AI strategy is good. I see AI tool as a device, so I love device, but I love some more than other. So the future, we'll see how I'm going to use those devices. And again, we're still in the dating phase of AI, and we'll see what the future will tell us. So why we decided Morristown to embark into the NLP business or AI? Well, we have a big population, and we really want to take care of patient appropriately. And I think to identify patient that are lost in the system was important. Too many times we see patient with severe AS crashing and burning in the ER, while actually 12 months ago they had critical AS with symptoms. We want to reduce the time to treatment. So again, people are waiting on the waiting list, so we didn't want to do this. We want to treat patients when they're asymptomatic, electively, in a civilized manner, so we reduce length of stay. We want to expand our program, believe it or not. With all those new technology coming, we want to make sure we don't miss a beat. And then we want to monitor a patient. And my feeling is in the future, we can personalize the follow-up of a patient with AS instead of being everybody with moderate AS is follow every 1 or 2 years. Maybe some moderate AS need 3 months. Maybe some moderate AS need 18 months. So I think conceptually, for me, it makes sense to try to personalize the follow-up as well, not only talking about treatment. So that's why we embark in this journey of using CardioCare first, but then obviously we need to expand to others. And for us, that was the first software we used was CardioCare, where we had all our disease, aortic valve, mitral, tricuspid heart failure, and AFib, and I had a nurse per bucket And I said, you find me all the moderate to severe AS patients that need to be treated. And the other nurse was the mitral, the other one was tricuspid. So, and we identified patient with a class 1, 2A, 2B indication. And that was for commercial cases, but then we also expand for research. Moderate AS, like I mentioned, for progress, aortic regurgitation with Genevalve, so and so on. So I like their research aspect because it's very good to find patient and make sure you don't waste your time and screen fail everyone. But there's also a big commercial application. But we started very well with research because it's way less threatening for the referring physician as well. And then the Target AS guideline, I think for us was really where we elevate our game, where we decide to literally use the guideline and send notification to patient and referring physician to say, hey, we need to get with the guideline. When you have severe AS class 1 indication, you need to be treated within 90 days. Like we did in early TAVR, you're going to mitigate mortality. And this is why we want to use AI to help us to optimize treatment care or pathway of care to make sure we mitigate mortality. So I think this automatic notification to the patient and the referring doctor make a big difference for moderate to severe AS and also with severe AS with indication. So this is what 1 hour of my life looked like at Morristown. Well, this is very easy. I have 2 buckets. One is a research pathway, which is I have 1 nurse, and then there's commercial pathway. There's other nurse, and I sit 1 hour per week with them, and I said, find me patient for this clinical trial with the Ignite software, and then we review the candidate, and we call the referring doctor, and then we schedule the patient. So it take a lot of time initially, but now we're very streamlined, and this is how we grow our program using assisted by AI. The letter, when we first send 120 letter for patient and referring doctor with class 1 indication, you can see that there's like a lot of patients that were sitting there and more than a year passed before and nothing happened. And sometimes 6 months, et cetera. So I think for us, if you have severe AS with class 1 indication and you didn't send a referral to the valve center or to a structural heart interventionist, that's a problem. And this is what we did. And we had a pretty good response. And a lot of patients didn't see their physician and then they didn't receive a referral with more than a year after a diagnosis and a clear indication. And we've been using Cardiovascular Care for 2 years, more than 2 years. And you can see in blue and in dark, this is the number of patients that Cardiovascular Care identify that were missed, but we were not referred to the valve center. And you can see there's almost 400 patients that had an AVR in 2 years that were not identified, were identified by Cardiovascular Care, but were not referred initially. And you can see the vast majority is almost 10 patients per month that we do a TAVR via Cardiovascular Care and 2 surgery roughly. So really, I think the return on investment is real. So this is a typical example of patient that after the outreach, the letter of the patient was treated. So this is a real patient with AI generated picture, obviously, but you can see this 80 years old patient in 21, 22, 23 was moderate to severe, this kind of a garbage diagnosis. We reached out to her in July 2024, and actually we screened her with Ignite, and in December we sent a letter, and then after that we treated in February. Okay, so this is, you can see the example, same thing. This patient was moderate to severe 2023, no echo in 2024. We reach out, we screen her for Cardiovascular Care, and we send a letter, and you can see we treat her in 2025. So this is type of example of patient that were having a diagnosis of moderate to severe AS, and they were kind of forgotten. And this is where we send the letter, people came and get treated. So this is one example of what we do, but there's more to come. And in terms of return on the return, people talk about ROI. You can see that in 2025, we did 90 TAVR detected by Cardiovascular Care, 15 surgical AVR, 2 MVR, and 2 tricuspid TEER. And this is 108 patient treated, which is a crazy return on investment in terms of the cost of the software. Of course, we will have seen those patients at some point in time, but I think to see them earlier is save money and save time and probably more optimal for patients. So for me, I will conclude with that. We dabble with cardio care, which is a good list where you can identify the problem. But I think now we're going to elevate this to the phase 3, which is I'm very, very excited, which is the future, where is screen the patient and try to make sure that you send to echo or imaging the right patient. And I think if you use multiple strategy of AI, such as like murmur, auscultation with echo, and Sparrow, and maybe a more deep echo software to make sure that you don't miss a diagnosis or the progression. I think that's my strategy that I elected to do with those 4: ECG first with echo next, and then you kind of assist and enhance the diagnosis of structural heart disease. So this is my humble view of a non-AI specialist, but more like a practical doctor. I see myself as a bricklayer, not an architect of AI, but I'm happy to use your software and improve patient outcomes. So, thank you.
That was great, Felipe. Thank you so much. Let me briefly add a little more, another layer here on top of what you just shared, and then I will open the panel for some brief discussion at the end. I'm gonna share my slide here very briefly, literally 2 minutes here, putting the whole thing into practice and how AI can help us with cardiovascular interventions. These are my disclosures. We feel that AI is not only important in diagnosis, but also in therapy when it comes to core interventions, even surgical, structural, peripheral, and so on. And I'm not gonna go today to how indispensable it can be in virtual clinical trials, in device R&D, in accelerating clearance of devices through regulatory bodies and so on. I will jump directly to a little bit more provocative, if you want, kind of like concept of how the cath lab will look like in the hopefully near future when we have invasive or non-invasive existing imaging technologies. And then we leverage the capabilities of AI to diagnose quickly and precisely and consistently the problem, whether it's structural, coronary, or whatever. And then we have computer vision to identify for this particular individual with this particular problem, what's the best treatment strategy, technique. And then we have a robot to deploy what computer vision has recommended based on AI-driven diagnosis of clinical data. And hopefully this can help with smoother operations, faster operations, better healthcare costs, and of course, clinical outcomes. That's the premise essentially here. And obviously AI is not an enemy, but we need the framework, as we discussed, is here to help us with democratization of expertise, with planning of procedures, with device R&D, with virtual trials to accelerate approval of devices through FDA and so forth. Education and training, very important, of course. The vision and the future of AI is bright. So I would like to leave it here on how AI can help us with planning, where we can use AI to have automatic lumen segmentation, tissue characterization, FFR, correlation to geography, simulation of the procedures to help us do a better job. I'm sure that more to come in the field. I would stop here for now, and I'm gonna open it to the panel for the last few minutes here to close it. So again, let me go to Effie. We see here that there is lots of promise, lots of opportunity with AI on both diagnosis and therapeutic aspects. How do you see AI bridging the gap between these silos? If so.
Between diagnosis and therapy?
Therapy, yes. Because it used to be non-invasive cardiology, interventional cardiology, and usually they don't talk to each other.
Yes, yeah. It has been quite siloed. But I do agree that we now have an opportunity to bridge the two worlds. With AI, along the entire journey. You mentioned that we can use it, and we have been using AI in cardiovascular imaging for decades. Honestly, we're just not calling it AI. But for instance, in my imaging training, we were using AI to simulate the DMVR for neo LVOT sizing and whatnot. So we have been using it, but now I think we can make it even more personalized planning with digital twins and with more advanced CT, MR, echo imaging for both for prediction as well. Imagine how it would be if we can use imaging biomarkers along with the rest of the EHR biomarkers to predict success, risks, complications that could happen very procedurally. Imagine how much better prepped the interventional team would be. Imagine the reduction in the time of radiation exposure for the team. And like you said, it's a great opportunity to bring imagers and non-invasive cardiologists, seeing the patients in the pre-procedural space together with interventional cardiology as kind of like a channel that flows through.
Iulia, do you feel that we have a legal framework here to protect this integration of AI in imaging, in interventional cardiology, in therapeutic strategies, and in the effort to bridge the gap? Or we are ourselves using a tool which is like to some extent a black box without coverage, and this might come with a price?
I think the societies are responsible for creating this legal framework, because at the end of the day, it's about patient care, and we are all have the common target, the excellent patient care. So AI can provide excellent care in diagnosis and management, and I believe now, like Thomas has done great work through ACC and collaborating with Pierre, Rohan, Philippe, with great groups. So it's the responsibility of societies to give us this legal framework on how to work ethically with artificial intelligence and make the best of these algorithms.
Pierre, what is your take here on the legal framework? Because that's something that it's always a point of anxiety for the operators and the imagers and those who provide diagnosis and therapy, how much liability we have when we trust a black box.
Listen, I know someone somewhere understands how it works, but if a patient comes in with an MI, I literally take their blood and put it inside of a black box, and then it either says red number bad or green number good. And, we have to trust within the systems that exist. So like, I don't actually know exactly what the analytes are for nanogram per deciliter troponin. But I do trust in the medical regulatory complex to say, hey, the right studies have been done and we've validated that red number is bad and green number is good, and this technology can help be used. So I don't think we have to fully reinvent the wheel. I think we have like an effective framework for how do we know that these technologies actually have a meaningful clinical impact, and we can hold them to those similar standards. Over time, we're going to better understand like how do these technologies differ from the things that exist today. But it was the same thing with bioresorbable stents and how those differed from previous ones and how they need to be studied and the like. So we're not going to figure everything out overnight, and the FDA is not going to figure out everything overnight. But the important thing is to say, do these technologies actually help? Are they providing a meaningful difference in value? And are they being studied in the way that we've realized for all forms of medical technologies have been beneficial? And I think if we check those two boxes, we can buy ourselves some time to figure out everything else. But it's really like, are there problems that AI is solving, and are people using them and feeling like it's actually worth the time, energy, and investment to get the technologies installed and used? That should be the number one goal.
Lovely. So we have 2 minutes, and I would like to play a game here. So I would say each of you provides a number in the scale of 10, with 0 being no excitement, 10 being super excited about the role of AI in cardiovascular medicine. I'm starting with Felipe. 0, no excitement, 10, super excited.
I'm at 12. I'm very excited.
Okay, excellent. So Thomas.
I'll moderate a little bit and say 7.
Number 7? You said 7?
7. Yeah.
So somebody has to come with the average here. So Effie.
I was gonna go with 7, but I'll change and say 7.5.
7.5. Okay, here we go. So far we are drifting around 8, the average. 9. Julia.
I agree with Philippe, 12, because
Wow.
we stellar presentations.
You become outliers now, and we're gonna take the outliers out to have more reliable data. Pierre.
3. You know, as someone who has
You
spent his entire
authored 2
career.
JACC papers about a lot of AI in medicine, and you call it 3 now?
I think, yeah, I think we have a long way to go to figure out what's real, what's not, and the like. So I think there will be specific pockets that are like 12, and then there's going to be a lot of things that look the same. And we got to fight like hell for those like specific pockets where it makes a really big difference.
Taking the 2 outliers, Grapsa and Felipe out, everybody else has an average of 5. I go with 5 as well. So again, we're drifting around the middle line. All right. So with that being said, it was, I believe, an exciting hour. Very nice discussion. Thank you, Julia, Effie, Thomas, Felipe, Pierre. Thank you, Rohan. Thank you, Sky. Thank you, BridgeBio, for the sponsoring. And I believe that the future is fantastic, is exciting. We need to be mindful and thoughtful, and things will go well. Thank you, everybody, for your participation, and keep spreading the word out.